Hi, this is Regina Favors with Overcoming Setback Requires Correction. And the title of this audio is Instruction Moves You Out of Setback. So the title is clear that overcoming setback requires correction, that when you are in a setback, it is usually because you've missed some sort of instruction, some opportunity, anything like that to basically obey and then advance you forward. So it requires correction. And the correction could be in the form of instruction because you need something to tell you what to do to move you forward, right? That's how you overcome. And I want to get into a particular chapter in Numbers and multiple verses to help you understand that there's some instruction that falls under divine direction. And anytime it falls under divine direction, it requires you to wait on God's timing. And so there are certain parts of your setback that you can get instruction to move out of. And it's just you relearning whatever it is that you need, that you didn't learn before. And then there is instruction that may be connected to the purpose or the calling on your life, and that requires some divine direction, which entails God's timing. So that's what we're going to get into, and I'm going to read this passage and then do a quick analysis. So this is Numbers 9:17 through 23. You can always take some time to read the full chapter or any of the chapters prior to them, but I'm going to read this and then give you a quick analysis. So verse 17, when the cloud moved from its place over the tent, the Israelites moved, and wherever the cloud stopped, the Israelites camped. So the Israelites moved at the Lord's command, and they camped at his command. While the cloud stayed over the tent, they remained camped. Sometimes the cloud stayed over the tent for a long time, but the Israelites obeyed the Lord and did not move. Sometimes the cloud was over it only a few days. At the Lord's command, the people camped, and at his command, they moved. Sometimes the cloud stayed only from dusk until dawn. When the cloud lifted the next morning, the people moved. When the cloud lifted day or night, the people moved. The cloud might stay over the tent for 2 days, a month, or a year. As long as it stayed, the people camped, but when it lifted, they moved. And then verse 23, at the Lord's command, the people camped, and at his command, they moved. They obeyed the Lord's order that he commanded through Moses. So if we look at this within the context of divine direction, waiting on God's timing, we see timing expressed in different ways. So timing could be long time. Timing could be from dusk until dawn. Timing could be day or night. Timing could be the next morning. Timing could be 2 days, a month, or a year. And then timing could be just depending upon when the cloud stopped, when the cloud moved, right? When you should camp and when you should move. I want you to get the visual for a minute, because the cloud is represented as instruction, and it is moved in the order of God, in the Lord's order, right? And so here it is, you are out here in the desert somewhere, wilderness wanderings, and you are out here in the wilderness, and there's this cloud by day, and think about it like this, think about it as light. What if you moved ahead of the cloud, or ahead of the light? Or what if the cloud moved and you stayed behind? You would be in darkness, right? So here it is, think about a flashlight or just some sort of, maybe like even the moon or something. Here it is, you are moving forward without instruction or without divine direction, and you have decided to move on your own. Okay, well, you won't have the wisdom that comes with that divine direction. You won't have the insight. You won't have the knowledge because you are moving on your own. or if you stay behind, you are staying behind in darkness, meaning that whatever God gave you in that moment, for that time, whether it was 2 days, 3 days, a month, from dusk until dawn, it was for that time. And in some cases you can move knowledge forward, but you glean what you can in that time. And when God says it's time to move forward, it's time to move forward, right? When you are trying to overcome a setback, or you are getting out of a setback, and instruction is that cloud that you are moving towards, you can't stay too long in one area. You can't stay too long, um, um, to the point that you miss the new instruction, you miss the new wisdom, you miss the new guidance, you miss the new direction. That's why it's very important that you understand what your gifts and talents are and what you are called to do. You discover your gifts and talents, and what type of assignment that you're going to have. And when you don't know that, you are basically walking blindly. That's why it's important to pray and ask God what your assignment is, what your gifts and talents are, because where you are supposed to be is just as important as what you are supposed to be. So I'm a teacher. I teach college English, and my main context is the community college system. And I sort of prefer it because I get students who are in transition, and I work well with people who are in transition, because I was in transition and I struggled in transition when I was making decisions. Some decisions that were good, and some that were kind of bad for me, and I had to retake those tests that I failed. So I prefer those students at the community college level. And so therefore my limit, based upon my degree, which is a master's in English, I can only teach at the community college level. Now, if I wanted to teach at the university level, I would have to enroll in a PhD program or already have a PhD. But it's important to understand that you don't need to teach everywhere. You don't need to be everywhere. That there is a specific place where your gifts and talents would be effective. That you can have the best gift and talent, but be somewhere you're not supposed to be, and it won't have any effect. And you can be the very best at whatever you're doing, but if you are in the wrong geography, if you are in the wrong context, the students at the university level are not necessarily in transition until they get to the junior and senior levels. So I have taught at the university level as a graduate student, and the first 2 years, but I believe I prefer community college level, because these are people who have made mistakes in their adult lives, and they are ready to make a decision to return to school and balance life and go back and make things right, or whatever reasoning they give. Okay, those are people that I can work with. I like those people. I like the context of those people. So I always have to be sure that I'm not in places I'm not supposed to be, because it is so tempting to want to move here or do this or do that or take on different types of responsibilities. But I realize that that there's a time that you can enlarge your capacity, but within the specific domain that you are assigned. I don't need to multitask and take on everything in the world. I need to stay within the immediate domain of teaching. Teaching is a spiritual gift. I need to stay within that domain. I also write, and wherever God has me, that's where I stay. So in the middle of my own setback, I was able to return to teaching. And then I had people saying, why don't you do this and why don't you do that or whatever, trying to get me into things I'm not supposed to be in, or trying to get me into something before my time. Just because something is a good idea doesn't necessarily mean that it's for you to do at that time. That the cloud is over you for 2 days or a month or a year. And so you set up camp and contribute where you are, because it's all still part of a learning process. And just because you were able to get out of something without really being kind of damaged, doesn't necessarily mean that you learned anything. You just got out of it. You will find many people who get out of this current setback that we are all in due to the pandemic and say, okay, I've returned to the workforce. Good, I'm glad, right? But the problem that still remains is the fact that you still didn't have enough money saved in the bank for just in case, or you leaned too heavily on a job that required you to have updated skills later. Maybe not everybody is required to have advanced technology skills, but there were some jobs and companies and small businesses that had to go out of business because they were not updated in their skills, in the company's product offerings, right? I was able to teach from home because the system is set up for that technology for online learning, but that wasn't the case for everybody. So just because you are exiting the setback doesn't mean that you still don't have something to learn. If certain hospitality jobs are shutting down due to a global pandemic, what is your alternative? What are your alternatives? It's time to reassess your skills to see what your where you may have a gap in your knowledge base. Knowing now that we can sort of work from home, we all need to upgrade our technology skills, right? So when you are camping and for 2 days, a month, a year, from dusk until dawn, the next morning, for a long time, that's the time to reflect and receive instruction on what it is you need to do, because there is going to be a turnaround. There's always a turnaround. You will exit your setback, but if you don't upgrade, or if you don't update yourself, and whatever that looks like for you, you could be headed for another setback. And you don't need a global pandemic to set you back again. Your company, realizing just how much the pandemic affected business, might just completely upgrade to technology. Just completely upgrade all the systems to technology. And if you don't know that technology, that's already a setback for you. So when you're thinking about divine calling, divine direction rather, there's direction, there's regular direction of you moving yourself forward, reading new books, receiving counsel, wisdom, reflecting, things like that. And then there is divine direction, where you have to wait on God's timing. That just because you are smart in some areas doesn't mean that you are smart in the area where God is taking you. And that you cannot transfer your smarts automatically when there is a divine direction at play. And that you can get ahead of God thinking that you have it all together because you are basing everything on your education or past experiences or the people you know, and still not be prepared for where you're going. And you can get the blessing too early, any blessing too early, to the point that it becomes a curse for you later. How many times have people have skipped steps and moved into their careers thinking that they are set, and then once they get to a level that requires them to know certain things and they don't know, they end up having to be pushed back, and we call that demotion or just suspended altogether, because when they got there to that level and they didn't know the things that they needed to know, and they were challenged, they couldn't perform. They couldn't prove that they could do the job. And so if you can't do the job, you can't keep the job. Now, that's just a simple explanation. But if you are called to do certain things, like if you have a passion and enthusiasm to help the homeless, or to help the people who are in prison, or to help college students. I don't know. Okay, that takes time and preparation. That's not going to be something that you can do within just a month or two, or just within the 4 years of graduating from college. That's just college. You're still going to have to take some time to be mentored. So that cloud represents divine direction. It represents instruction. It represents mentoring. You need a mentor. I'm leery of people who have never been mentored by someone, that there isn't an immediate go-to of someone that they can say, I received mentoring from this person. Because you have people all the time who call themselves. They're not called by God. They just call themselves to do whatever it is they want to do. And they don't have the divine direction. And anytime you have divine direction, you get divine protection. So divine direction is really all about waiting on God's timing. If you want to be married, if you want to do certain things, right? Help certain people, be an advocate, that's going to take some real timing. You're not going to pitch a tent and just contribute immediately. That pitching of the tent is a lesson for you. It's like a university in the wilderness, right? Learning all that you need to learn before you can then begin to execute. So instruction moves you out of setback, and instruction is really in the form, or correction is really in the form of instruction. Thank you very much for listening to this audio.